literally the first thing you say in the recording is a flub. It's awesome. It's uneditable. There's nothing that can be done. Okay, so we've got chat up now. Waiting to see who gets to show up and is first in the chat room. Should be interesting. Dokie. Here we go. And we're live on Twitch. We're live on Facebook. Hello, everybody there on Facebook. How you doing? Quit that. A little bit behind today, you guys. So doing some kind of final work for the prep. Hey, Sean. No worries. Oktoberfest, bro. You got to go do that. Chris Grawl, famous author. What's going on? How are you? All right. Going through my checklist. Monitors off. Turn on cam color. Boom. Streaming's on, obviously. Position some mouse pads. Position some monitors. We'll do that when A gets up here. Move chairs. Script timer. A headphones. Still stuff to do. Entertain yourselves for a moment. I'll be right back. Let's see. Move chairs. Gotta go get the chairs, everybody. Riveting TV, isn't it? This is how we do it. Dun, 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 dun. This is how we do it. To all of my neighbors, you have much flavor. Okay, that's done. What is next, ladies and gents? Boom, boom, boom. Okay. We'll be back in a second. Remember, if you are watching this after the fact, this timer over here, when that hits 0, that is story time. So you can skip all of this extra stuff. Hello, Kim, Cobalt, Mitch. How you doing, Mitch? Good to see you. Edward in the house. Wonderful. Don, hello, hello. Christine, hello. It's like a damn Marx Brothers show in here with all this noise and stuff. Just a bit outside. Okay, we'll drop that. And we're back like nothing ever happened whatsoever. Get this down. It's like a got like Kit here. Michael, I couldn't help but notice your desk is not going down correctly, Michael. Bam, bam, bam. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Let's go to the chat. Oop, I got to fix that graphic. We'll do that in only a moment. I got a couple graphics to fix. Let's see. Letting you know what is coming up. Tonight is a live read of Victim with a capital V, Part 1. That is the third in our Death is Black anthology. Fourth collection, Death is Black color collection, fourth in the color collection series. After we do the live reading, we're going to have Jennifer Brody, author of Sacrifice of Blood and Stars. She can talk about her book and what it's like to write for the biggest storytelling company in the world, Disney. She might be in the chat room. I am not sure. We will play a trailer of a new project for you. And, oh yeah, oof. I'm going to try and pull that off because I haven't sound checked that just yet. We have a trailer for a new full cast audio production of one of my scripts. I'm going to try and play that for you right before Jennifer comes on. And then just, the usual. Tiring day, trying to finish up Warpath. Lots of stuff going on here at Empty Set Entertainment. You know what? While we talk, I'm just going to go and fix this graphic right now. Did I get a little bit behind on things today, you guys. Nuts. There we go. Let's go back to the OBS. Fortunately, you all love each other so much in the chat room. Makes things much easier. Much easier. Okay, there we go. Now we go back to the open. And then we're just going to get a little bit of a peek here Ah, we still got trigger guard up there. How did that happen? Crazy. I'm crazy for feeling so blue. Crazy for falling in love with you. Just spread that out. Spread it out like butter. Make sure our guest is properly represented. It's very important. And now we're back to the opening. Once again, if you want to watch all this hullabaloo, in 1 minute, we will begin story time. Now, story time is going to be interesting this time because I have this giant-ass book to read from. Couldn't find the actual script or had the actual story I had submitted, so we're going from the actual print book, but it's a very cool print book, and I'll give you a good look at that. I hope, looks like the chat room's jumping, you guys. Well, it's great to see you all. It is Wednesday. A and I have been working our fannies off this week. Things have been a little bit bonkers. A is in the chat room. That's great. She will be up later to hang out with me. And she's muted here. Great. Headphone 2. Okay, 26 seconds. A, when you come up, we're going to need to adjust your headphones. I forgot to grab those. So we'll get those in a second. Be right back, people. Hold on. Party time. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Let me turn that off right there. Boom. That looks pretty good. I think we're in pretty good shape right now. Yes, we're pretty good. Pretty good. Let's move this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start story time. But before I start story time, how you doing? How you feeling? Everything good? I have a big book to show you. This is from the collection Unfettered 2, edited by Sean Speakman at Grim Oak Press. Look at this. Excuse me while I slips this out. Oh. Very nice, very nice. That's called a slipcase. Those of you who have dirty thoughts in your head, it's not my business. I don't do dirty thoughts. This was a collection, I believe, was out in 2016. There's also a Unfettered 1, which Sean put out to help pay for his hospital bills because I think he had some form of cancer at the time. I'm not entirely sure. But I was super honored and flattered to get this invitation. And I am also an Unfettered 3 with a sequel to this very story. This story is called Victim with a capital V. Now, this was a big deal for me because I'll read you some of the names that are in here. This is all signed. All the authors signed it. Sean did an amazing job on this. No big deal. Jim Butcher, Rachel Kane, Charlene Harris. I don't know who. Did she ever write a book? I don't know. No big deal. Just a true blood person. Tim Lockwood, Sean McGuire, Naomi Novik. If you haven't read Naomi Novik's Temporary series, you're missing out. Peter O'Rulian, Brandon Sanderson, Sean Speakman, Django Wexler, and of course, Scott Sigler. I would like to point out, they all signed their full name, and I just signed Scott because I get my last name when I sign it. Just turns out to be like a total squiggle rip. All right, let's get it crack-a-lackin', ladies and gentlemen. Oh, there we are. Look at this. Oh, it's a built-in bookmark. How very nice. Okay, here we go. Now, quick housekeeping on how we tell stories here. If I flub a line, I snap my fingers twice, and that tells the editor to cut that part out. And also, since this is a print book, I'm going to have to take a moment to pause while I turn the page each time so that that noise isn't all over the audio as well. I also will point out that I did not get a pre-read of the story, and I have not looked at the story for about 8 years. So hopefully we'll get through this and it won't put too much work on the editing process. That's about it. Let's see what we got here. We got yeah, that's right. There we go. This is for Death is Black. Ladies and gentlemen, Sound looks good. Everybody can hear me. Cobalt, there will be no fact checking on this particular read. So yes, we'll be, it's the craziest line I've ever heard. I was told there will be no fact checking. Crazy, crazy, crazy. All right, let's get ready. Steve, I want you to know I just made the same mistake I made last week, and I just caught it this time. Check, check, check. Got a sound wave? Good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. This story is Victim with a capital V by Scott Sigler, which is me. Miss, did you just wet yourself? Lisa heard the man's voice and didn't hear it. She felt the instantly cooling warmth spreading through her jeans, and she didn't feel it. That laugh. That laugh, and the day everything changed. Miss, are you all right? Lisa fought to come back to the moment. That laugh somewhere behind her. The man speaking in front of her. Bartender. Probably owned the place. She hadn't had time to order a beer. So many people, 3 deep at the bar, it had taken her 15 minutes of waiting just to get a stool. The bartender was leaning toward her, one hand palm flat on the worn, warped wood of the ancient bar top that was rumored to be 7 centuries old. The other palm resting on the handle of a wood club. The other palm resting on the handle of a wood club laid flat. The end of the club was rough, barely ground down from the oak branch it had once been. The handle, though, was worn smooth. Lisa wondered if the bartender spent a minute without this weapon in his hand. I'm fine, she said. Mm-hmm. She couldn't see his lips through his thick beard. Shaggy mop of black hair. A little bit of hay in it. Eyebrows with a few hairs growing crazy in every direction. Nose hairs just as hectic. A big man. Not the kind Lisa usually... A big man. The kind Lisa... A big man. The kind Lisa usually didn't let come this close to her. Not that she let any man get this close. He spoke quietly. A rare act of kindness, perhaps, in a room packed full of screaming, laughing, reveling people who looked like they were not very kind at all. Well, you pissed yourself, he said. I can smell it already. In here, that's saying something. I'll get a mop. You clean up, come back. Or don't come back, but right now, you need to go, okay? That laugh. That day when everything changed. She noticed the bartender's fingers curl close to a full... boy, forget this. Here we go. She noticed the bartender's fingers curl close to a full grip on the worn, smooth club handle. A big man. Big beard, big head, big hand, big arms, big gut. She had no doubt that club had connected with many a head. Blood spatters dotted his whitish apron. From making lunch, not from enforcing calm. Pork chop special, 5 Bowens, said the message written in chalk on the rough piece of black slate mounted on the wall. Not that most of the people in here could read, probably. People around her, starting to sniff the air. To her left, a red-headed woman in a skimpy yellow dress looked up from a book, her nose wrinkling. Disgusting, she said, then went back to her book. Lisa couldn't think. The memories of the past, clouded and mixed with the overwhelming sensations of the bar. The crackling fire, the heat of burning wood and packed bodies. The out-of-tune harp, and the more out-of-tune harpist singing about the the out-of-tune harp, and the more out-of-tune harpist singing the one about the naked man in the convent, drunken whore screaming along with lyrics that were more wrong than right. A cavalcade of sight and sound and scent, all muddled by a rapidly growing feeling of shame and humiliation. Then, for the second time, she heard that laugh. A cutting, horrid noise. The sound of fear. The sound of pain. If she'd had any piss left, she might have let that go as well. "Your name," she said to the bartender, her voice even quieter than his, the little voice of a little girl and not a 20-year-old woman. "You're in Ziggy's place," the bartender said. "I'm Ziggy. Now go. Last time I'll ask nice." Lisa didn't bother turning around to look across the dark bar through the light of the hanging oil lamps. She knew who had made that laugh, that glass grinding against granite bit of harshness which contained only malice, not humor or joy. The kind of laugh drawn out at the expense of others, like when someone tripped and fell. 10 years since she'd heard that laugh, yet she knew exactly who it was. "I'm sorry," she said to Ziggy. She slipped off the wooden stool. Lisa walked to the door, focusing all her energy on just putting one foot in front of the other, slipping past the people packed into the place. Her wet jeans clung to her thighs. She hid her head in the hood of her gray-brown cloak, pulled the sides tight around her to hide the damp spot at her crotch and the streaks down her legs. Why was she leaving? He was there with her. Her training was no training. She wasn't 20, she was 10, she was helpless. She was a victim, the kind with a lowercase v. Someone thumped her shoulder, spun her half around. No, she had walked into the door's thick wooden frame. Maybe others were laughing at her now. She slid the wooden bolt back and opened the door to blinding late afternoon sun. Southern-facing doorway. A counselor had taught her that once, taught her that in an afternoon fight she needed to put her back to the south, position her attacker so the sun would be in his eyes. But she wasn't fighting. She was running. A man behind her, dangerous, and she couldn't even turn to face him. That laugh, that day, when everything changed. Lisa stumbled outside, eyes watering from the setting sun. An onslaught of city noise, a wave of people. Horns and shouts and laughter, the taste of dust. How many times had she dreamed of a random encounter like this? All the years of training, the pain, the sacrifice, the cuts and bruises and scrapes and broken bones. The first 100,000 throws. The second 100,000. She'd pushed herself, dreaming of a moment when she might track the man down, slice his cock and balls from his body, maybe stuff them in that mouth that had forced itself upon hers. She had dreamed of meeting him again, of being ready, being armed, being a full-grown woman and not a helpless little girl. And now, by random chance, it had finally happened. Had she put a sliver in his throat, sliced his Achilles to watch him crawl, lured him in close to spike his groin or armpits or wrists? No, she had pissed herself, without ever laying eyes on him, from nothing more than the sound of his laugh. "Get the fuck out of the way!" said a hunched old woman wearing moth-eaten black robes. Basket of bread. Did she sell to the patrons or deliver to Ziggy? Lisa realized she was still standing in the bar's doorway. Sorry, she said, and walked out onto Frisco's brick streets, letting the woman into Ziggy's place. The woman slammed the door shut behind her, cutting off the sound of the horrible harpist and the drunken singing, and of the man's laugh. Lisa had come into Frisco hours earlier. She had walked for weeks, but only a few hours outside of the city, she'd hitched a ride on a wagon full of wrestlers, shouting at people to come watch the matches at Presidio Arena. Brightly colored canvas wagons, each bearing the painted image of one of the wrestlers. Don the Destroyer, Evil Linny, Canyon Kid, and more. Riding on the back of El Tornado's wagon, the city of Frisco had been a wonder. Buildings of wood and stone, some as high as 4 stories tall. More people than she had ever seen in one place. Wobbly carts pulled by cows, oxen, and buffalo. People on horseback. Dray horses struggling against the weight of huge, rattling transport wagons. Now, standing on the street, Lombard, she think they called it. Now, standing on the street, Lombard, she think. Now, standing on the street, Lombard, she thought they called it. The city was all just too much. An attack on her eyes and ears. And her nose. Shit. Everywhere. Horse shit, buffalo shit, cow shit, pig shit, people shit. Noise. Mooning and braying and shouting and bone trumpets and laughter and talking, so much damn talking. The sun blazed down, but it wasn't hot. The mist from the ocean or the bay. Always foggy at night. She'd been told. Summers here colder than most winters everywhere else. At least, that's what she had heard. But people who said that hadn't seen a real winter. Lisa had. 10 of them, to be exact. At the hovel, in the mountains, where Counselor Quandre had taken her after finding her bloody and crying. And now she had come here, to Frisco, capital of the Redwood Empire, because there would only be one moment in her life where the millennia changed, where the year flipped from 3999 to 4000. And she wanted to spend it in a big city, not holed up in the icy mountains with the same 50 people she saw every goddamn day. December 31st. New Year's Eve. The sun just beginning to set, and she reeked of piss. What had she been thinking? The hovel was safe. She should have stayed home. She should have stayed hidden away from the world. A bump from behind, making her stumble. Balance first. There is nothing without balance. Muscle memory kicked in. Feet wide, knees bent, she turned only enough to see who had hit her. Not the laughing man. A couple, drunk, giggling, stumbling out of the bar. His hand in her shirt. Her hand down his pants. How do people walk like that? People. So many people. She wasn't used to it. Her jeans growing colder. Were people staring at her? She could smell her own piss. She hadn't drank enough water. Counselors always told her to drink water whenever she could. The crack of a whip. Her feet moved her out of the way of a pair of Belgian draft horses pulling a wheeled beer keg kigger. Her feet moved her out of the way of a pair of Belgian draft horses pulling a wheeled beer keg bigger than her whole room back in the hovel. Her head didn't even reach the top of the horse's shoulders. Huge animals. Horses, keg, and driver wearing a red vest and yellow felt hat, sitting on a buckboard attached to the keg, whip in hand, glaring down at her, rode past. "Fucking tourists," he said. "You think you own the fucking streets." She needed to get out of this crowd. Just a few minutes alone to think. Lisa moved to the stone wall of Ziggy's place. Having her back to the rough blocks made her feel a little better. Rumor was the stones were from the original peninsula wall, breached 1,000 years ago by the Wyoming hordes, before Goddess Chantrell dug the trench. Lisa was breathing hard, like the untrained, like a little girl. Breathing second. You can't fight if you can't breathe. "Shut up," she said to no one, to those goddamn mantras the counselors made her say 1,000,000 times, that they drilled into her head over and over again. The 6 facets. Balance, breathing, avoidance, warning, disabling, and the last facet, killing. Was that what she wanted to do to the laughing man? Yes. 1,000,000,000,000,000 times. Yes. The smell of piss. Oh, sure. She was so tough. A real killing machine. She was such a danger, wasn't she? Pants soaked with her own instinctive fear, she was just a deadly little warrior. Lisa slid her hands into her wide sleeves, felt her fingers brush against the familiar slivers in their little leather sheaths before she gently held her own elbows. Her hands shook. Her breath rattled. She dipped her head, letting the heavy hood hide her face a little more. Turning with the crowd, she walked down the street, eyes looking out from under her brows. So many buildings, people everywhere. An open door. No, just another bar. She needed a moment alone. There, an alley. That would do. She turned right into the narrow alley. 2 bums, sleeping, covered in mud and filth and shit. Even if they weren't asleep, they were clearly little threat. Everyone is a threat. Those who underestimate the lowliest one... Everyone is a threat. Those who underestimate the lowliest wind up being 6 feet lower than they. Shut up, Lisa hissed. What did her counselors know anyway? All that training, and this was how she had reacted? She walked to the back of the alley. A dead end. High stone walls on 2 sides, brick at the back. Counselors screamed from somewhere in her mind, told her to get out of there. Avoidance. Harder to avoid if there's only one way to run. But Lisa didn't care. Everything they had taught her was a lie, obviously. She walked to the end wall, put her back to it, slid down to squat on boot heels. Her heavy gray-brown cloak rested on the muddy ground, soaking up water. So what? She didn't care. She had to clean everything anyway. Ziggy, an ugly man, fat and swollen, but he had been nice to her. He hadn't laughed. Lisa wanted to go back. The ocean was close to here, just a bit to the north. She could see Alcatraz Castle rising up impossibly high above the skyline. How did they make such buildings? Maybe she could walk to the ocean, clean her clothes, and go back to Ziggy's place. What was she thinking? The laughing man had been in there. She couldn't go back. Not ever. She needed to get out of Frisco. Stupid to come here. The counselors had warned her. She hadn't listened. Time to leave the way she'd come. Just walk out of the city and down the peninsula. Even if she could have afforded a ferry to Oakland, she didn't want to be stuck on a little boat with so many people. With so many men. On a boat, there was nowhere to run. The only avoidance was jumping in the water and people didn't live long there, not with the sharks and the orcas and the wolf seals. Maybe her counselors were wrong about much, but when it came to being eaten alive in the ocean, she wasn't going to second guess them. Lisa felt like an idiot. She felt useless. She felt weak. 10 years wasted. Nothing going to change here. Time to get the hell out of the city. Get out and never come back. Just walk south the way she'd come in. Swing wide of Daly City, where the Syntophiles dominated regardless of who sat on the redwood throne. She stood, hands never coming out of her sleeves. Back to the mountains, back to the hovel. 2 months of walking to get here. 2 months of walking to return. Lisa took one step away from the wall, then stopped cold when 2 men entered the alley. Laughing, swaying slightly, already drunk perhaps. They wore dusters, one the deep green common among travelers from the Pacific Northwest, the other a dark gray, both of them thick with road filth. Cattleman hats that had seen better days. The look of men used to violence. Lisa didn't move. She was half in shadow. Maybe they'd be drunk enough to do their business and leave without noticing her. Each man took a side of the alley, leaning against the wall with one hand, reaching into their pants with the other. Excuse me. Better pace yourself, fishy, said the one in dark gray. Keep drinking this hard, you'll be passed out before 10. When I want, said the one in green, who shivered once, then shook himself, then grunted as his piss began to flow. Oh, sweet Buddha, that is better. He tilted his head back, stared up at the darkening sky, and let out a sound of pure relief. Oh, oh. When I want your opinion, Jimmy, I'll beat it out of you. His accent was thick, but she could understand him clearly enough. Northern Coosa tribes, maybe? She didn't have a lot of experience with the Washington dialects, but it might be that, too. The green-dusted man turned slightly, started pissing on one of the sleeping bums. The man woke suddenly, face scrunched, hand coming up to block the stream. Asshole, the bum said, obviously well practiced at going from passed out to wide awake, a survival skill for someone who lived on the street. I'll kill you. The man in green kicked out a black boot. The heel smashed into the bum's mouth. The bum sagged back into a shapeless heap. I doubt it, the man in green said. Ah, God damn it. I pissed all over myself. I should have finished before I kicked him. The man in gray laughed as he put his cock back in his pants. The laugh didn't last long. One glare from the man in green silenced it. Then the man in green looked to the end of the alley, stared Lisa in the eyes. What have we here? The man said. Hello, little lady. The man in dark gray saw her as well. Lisa said nothing. She wished herself invisible. She wished she had never come to San Francisco. She wished, most of all, that she hadn't been so stupid as to walk into a dead-end alley. Dark meat, the man in green said. My favorite. Name's Fish, and this here's my traveling partner, James. Whew, that was a rough one. That is part 1. This is actually going to wind up being a 3-part story, and it gets a little violent towards the end. But we are trimming it up a little bit because we have a guest. You want to come on up whenever you're ready? It is shockingly hard to read in a microphone while holding a big-ass book. Who knew? It causes all kinds of problems. So we'll play the trailer at the end of this episode after we say goodbye to Jennifer Brody. And then I'll play the trailer again next week. Don't want to do it right now because I'm not sure how loud it'll be. It's a little crazy. But trailer of a brand new thing that's going to be out from a podcast called Table Read, which is a fantastic podcast. I got to go up and record one of the parts myself up in LA. Had a great time doing it. It's a huge podcast, like the #1 fiction podcast, 1, 2, or 3 at any particular given time. Let's see. Got to see when A is coming on up here to get this ready to go. Okay, sounds like she is on the phone. So we're just going to jump right into this. Let me adjust this camera a little bit. And going back over to Zoom, asking Jen to unmute. Okay. So this, guys, this is about to begin recording for Deep Cuts. You know, of course, we do these as bonus episodes. If you got to tap out now, you can catch this week's conversation in the podcast feed. Subscribe at scottsigler.com/subscribe, which includes links for Spotify, Podcast, and Apple Podcasts. Let me set my timer. Babe, you out there? Here we go. Well, hello, sweetheart.
Hi there.
Come on in. Ladies and gentlemen, look who is in the house. Jen, we're getting to it. Just give me 1 second. I gotta grab your headphones, Peter.
Take your time.
The one thing I forgot to do. Just do this. All right.
I got you.
Okay, that's great. And somehow I hurt my fucking arm picking up headphones. It's one of those days, you guys. One of those days. Oh, I gotta do this.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to talk to Jen.
Yep. Okay, let me.
I'm excited.
You're unmuted.
I haven't seen you in forever.
I know, and I miss you. I've seen this guy a couple
Yes.
times in the
All
wild.
the time.
I
You
know.
bring Jen down a little bit volume wise. Okay, I think we're ready to go.
All right, how is this look? And we gotta tilt this because it's just me by myself.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
It's you, yourself, and I.
Well, it's none of that.
And scooch a little closer to me, Pumpkin.
I will.
Come a little closer. Don't be shy.
Tiny little room.
Oh, that
we
looks
have.
great.
Yeah.
We're doing great. We're doing great.
Hey, everybody.
The studio is extraordinarily small. So let's do this. And some of this we're going to do on the fly. So good luck with the. Okay, hold on. All right, ready, Peanut?
I am.
Okay, let me call up. File open recent. Deep cuts. 19. No, 19. And okay, get everybody check.
Transitions 2. Yep.
Yeah, they're muted.
Okay.
Just talk a little bit.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Good. Jen, talk a little.
Testing.
There we
What?
go. I guess I got to bring her back up a little bit. All right. Okay, so now we do our teaser. And when we do the teaser, that grabs everybody in the podcast right away. And then we do a commercial. So this will sound a little weird, but this is how we do it. Dun, 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 dun. Are you ready, babe? Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. Wow, it must be awesome to write books for Disney, the biggest fiction machine in the history of mankind. They must shower you with Dalmatians and aliens and lightsabers and Beskar steel and sexy anthropomorphic mice and all kinds of things. And you get to hang with George Lucas, wear Disney princess dresses, and have Mark Hamill on speed dial and wear Snow White's cape. I wonder what it's like.
Wait. FTO, Scott Sigler. Turns out we have a real-life Disney author ready and able to tell us exactly what it's like. Want to chat with her?
Yes, I do.
All right, we'll be back with Jennifer Brody right after this.
Okay, that's our teaser. And now we do our intro. Here we go. Hello, Rebel Scum. Welcome to Deep Cuts, the bonus episode of the Scott Sigler Slices Fiction Podcast, where a sci-fi author and an audiobook narrator discuss things and stuff in the world of writing and content creation. I am Scott Sigler, sci-fi horror author known far and wide as the future Dark Overlord.
And I'm A.B. Sigler, audiobook narrator, and on this Deep Cuts, we're talking to Jennifer Brody, author of A Sacrifice of Blood and Stars, about her fiction writing for Disney.
A reminder that this is a bonus episode of the Scott Sigler Slices feed. It is not part of any particular tale. Listen if you'd like. We'd love to have you, but there's nothing in this episode you need to keep track of the stories.
All right. Well, Jennifer, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Thanks for having me on. I love watching you two in action.
It's so fun.
I'm pooped today. I'm telling you, I'm pooped. But let's get through the basics first. We're going to read Jennifer's intro. We're going to jump right into this. There we go. Jennifer Brody, aka Vera Strange, is the author of the Disney Chills series, the 13th continuum trilogy, Spectre Deep Six, which was a Bram Stoker Award finalist, prompting Forbes to call her a star in the graphic novel world. She is the co-author of All Is Found, a Frozen anthology, and Star Wars Stories of Jedi and Sith, where she penned the Darth Vader story. Her forthcoming short fiction will appear in Weird Tales and other anthologies, while her new space romantasy series, A Sacrifice of Blood and Stars, debuted in fall of 2024. She lives and writes in Joshua Tree, California.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Absolutely great. So glad to have you here. It's so weird because as a trio, we have only just hung out at ancillary work events, but this is a work event. So I'm glad to get into and finally get to talk about your fiction, which I love.
Yeah, and it's still a hangout, right?
Of course.
Totally. We are the hostesses and host with the mostesses and most. It's kind of the way that works.
Hosts. So we know that you have A Sacrifice of Blood and Stars, right?
Yep.
I keep wanting to say Bones and Stars, but I don't know why.
Well, it's all those titles that have all those words.
Well, I also think it's because I read like your horror work and Bones makes a little, sort of feels good there too. But tell us about your new release.
It's a book that was long in the making. It was one of those dark little projects that I started many years ago thinking nobody will care about this. Nobody will publish this. This is completely unpublishable. And cut to, it's kind of in vogue. It's a new adult. We're calling it astro romance, space romantasy. It's my Dear John in Outer Space. It takes place in a near future.
Oh, Dear John in Outer Space breaks my heart a little bit already.
I know. Well, it's a world where Earth is demilitarized. We fight all our proxy wars in space. And it picks up with a girl on Earth who's just enlisted in Space Force. And there's a program now to help with the distance and being so far away from Earth and how hard it is to adjust. So they pair you in a sympathetic program with someone on Earth, kind of like a glorified pen pal.
Sorry, continue.
But of course, here is your enemies to lovers. She gets paired with the biggest bully in high school who she hates the most. So she's forced to communicate with him on a regular basis, share all her deepest, darkest fears, secrets, everything. It's her worst nightmare. And it's kind of these dual coming of age stories as she goes to basic training in the asteroid belt in space, and he goes to a future University of Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And we kind of go back and forth exploring these kind of dual coming of age stories. And part of the concept of the book was to look at these two things that happen when you're 18 that are completely divergent but very real in our world. What is it like if you go into the military? How different is that from going to college, which is what I did? Mm-hmm. But I was very interested in kind of pairing these things together and taking a look and also at, the dystopian sci-fi elements. It's a crazy book. It's, Scott and I talk a lot about how he writes some crazy stuff in his books, I always think it's just so much, but I think the book is a really fun ride, and it is going to be a trilogy.
Now, if you guys are a fan of my work, my writing style and Jen's writing style are very similar. Very similar writing style. There's a lot of elements introduced in the first act and a lot of different storylines, and then everything gradually weaves its way together close to the end, and there is an over-the-top climax scene for everything to come to closure.
And it also seems a little bit like you have this dual coming of age story, which we're quite used to, but we also maybe have a new world order, which is I'm not trying to say it's coming of age because I don't know that, but it sort of feels like if you put yourself in a wholly new situation while learning those two familiar things, that is a thing you've done very well in some of your other books and helped introduce sort of difficult things that we all can get through together in a not necessarily dystopian, but maybe villain-esque kind of a background or whatever. And I think the books I've read, I haven't read this one, but the books I have read of yours, that you do that very well. That idea that we're all in this together, including the backdrop. We're all going to grow. And for me, as a fan, I will say, it's not that you do it very well and that it all is tied up with a perfect bow. It feels, to me, relevant and real to things that I did in my own life, even though it's a dystopian or a villain-esque background and all that stuff. So I'm excited about this one. I hope it's a lot like some of your other Vera Strange books that I have read.
They get. I think, it appeals, I think, to fans of Continuum or Disney Chills if they're ready to read up a little bit. Yeah, and I always try to ground things and make them relatable. And I do write very dystopian and or dark horror. But I always like, especially in the sci-fi, to have an element of hope. I really enjoy the Hunger Games. I would never write the Hunger Games. Mm-hmm. It's too, Star Wars is more tonally what really drives me.
Okay.
Even if I love Alien and those elements, but Alien, even we do get a good ending, even though it's like that big, nice comeback. I like my heroes to at least have hope that's kind of driving them. And even if things are very dark at the end, that there is that still waiting for them. I think A Sacrifice of Blood and Stars is a story that I started writing before there even was a Space Force. So it's a book where a lot of the backdrop for the world build actually has come to pass completely, including the new arms race in space that is happening in real time. And people always ask me, like, isn't Space Force just a joke? And I'm like, no, it's actually real. I know people
it's a real
who actually
thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Space Force.
Yep.
Oh no, it's the fifth branch.
And if I remember right, you had named this Space Force before the Space Force became an actual thing for the U.S. government. Is that right?
Yeah, I was calling it, so in the original draft, it was called Space Corps, which is what it was originally called, and it was underneath the U.S. Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of not really focused on, they didn't have much funding. And what happened was in our go around with President Trump, where he made that crazy speech, I'm in the middle of writing this thing, and he says, we have Space Force. And it was one of those, is it true? Did he make it up and just blurt it out and say something, because he does that? Or is it a secret, but was he even supposed to say it? And I had to actually pause the book and wait. And about 9 months later, the vice president made a speech announcing that it was real, that it was the fifth branch of the military. And then I had to change the name to Space Force. I was like, do I have to? I have to. The symbol looks like Star Trek. They're called Guardians, not soldiers. Mm-hmm. So I actually had to redo some of the world build to align it with things as they were happening in real time. And when I first started, I was like, nobody cares about militarization of space, just me. Nobody cares about proxy wars very much. And right now, through the writing of this book, the Ukraine invasion started, which is a proxy war with Russia. You can look at the Middle East and, so this book is very much about that kind of thing, except now in my book, it happens in space. So Earth feels very safe and very serene. It's a little bit inspired by how back in the old wars, like World War II, you knew when we were at war. It was felt at home. Every single person felt it. It impacted their lives. There was rationing. Women were going to work in factories. Men were gone. There was lag time in communication. And now we are actively at war, despite what sometimes is said. We are. We're deploying more troops now. But at home, we don't feel it. Yeah. And so this book kind of takes it to a bigger extreme where now it's even more removed from what we see because it's in outer space. It's not on Earth anymore. But the illusion of peace is only an illusion because kids are still being shipped up to die in the stars. And that's a big thing. And I already finished the second book. And the second book, the campus element and the anti-war protests become very major, which was planned. And I was writing that during the whole thing happening on
when all
TV
the things started going nuts on campuses,
at Berkeley, at Harvard, where I went to school. And that was very wild to me. And it feels very out of body. I'm sure, Scott, you've had this happen where things you write about or technology that you explore becomes real.
Yep.
and it can be a little scary too.
It
Like
can.
I scare myself sometimes because we hadn't seen anything like that, I think, really since the Vietnam War with that much student activism
Yeah.
on
There was
war.
a little bit with Iraq and Kuwait, a little
little
but
bit,
not
yeah,
too much.
not quite the same,
Real quick,
though.
a question from the chat room. David Lamb asks, "Is the Continuum? Are you going to revisit the Continuum series, or is that series complete?"
And I wasn't
Right
sure.
now,
Yeah.
it's complete. And, I would never write anything off, as I think no author really should. I mean,
Mm.
I hope we get our It sequel. It's been 27 years. King hints at it. So there's always things, but for me, we were working on trying to make that into a television series, and there's actually been many attempts, and there was a full package with the producers, showrunners, big screenwriters set up at Sony, and it was a victim of the strikes.
Okay.
So we held the strike, the option was extended, and then they cut a lot of their development, and budgets are contracting, and Continuum, probably no shock if you looked at it, is on the more expensive end, as a lot of sci-fi tends to be. So it doesn't mean it won't ever happen. It just means that iteration kind of died.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're kind of regrouping, and we'll see what happens with Continuum. So
Going
but
back-
for now, it's nice.
Going back to Sacrifice of Blood and Stars, one of the things that really impressed me with this book, being a dude who's gone to college, is I felt you really nailed the male lead in this. And some of 18-year-old young men, Western culture, at least, it's an analog for that. Some of the dumb decisions that we make, some of the approaches where we do something and don't know why. I was just so impressed with how much you nailed what it's like to be a guy at that age. Did you just write like, this is a person, this is the way people act, or did you have any kind of influence to get that so right?
I think that's such a good question to ask. I mean, for me, I actually really like writing male characters and male points of view, and I do it a lot. I do it in Disney Chills, of course, albeit a little bit younger. And I did it in Continuum. And what I really hate are perfect characters where there's nothing wrong. And I do think, much as it can be fun to have fantasy and wish fulfillment in certain types of fiction, it doesn't really interest me. I'm much more interested in really flawed characters. I think one of the reasons I'm so obsessed with Darth Vader and that Anakin Skywalker is not only one of my favorite characters of all time, but also my favorite Star Wars character, is how human and how deeply flawed he really is. And Lucas did, I thought, a really nice job, and Hayden Christensen a really great job in kind of portraying that adolescent mood swings, anger, messing things up. And of course, in Star Wars, it takes us to a very dark place. Dre is not that. But I don't know if it's growing up with brothers, or maybe it's just having dated dudes at this age, right? I mean, I know, we've been around the block. If you've been out there as a woman person and dated some people at this age, I just think they make a lot of bad decisions. And I think we kind of see these like perfect sort of male love interest characters. And, Dre, because we get to write his point of view, I mean, he's deeply conflicted. He knows he's a coward. And even what I find interesting is he makes bad decisions, and often he knows it is a bad decision, but he can't stop himself from doing it.
Well, and I love that. I'm so sorry. I was just going to say.
I want to hear what you have to say about
that.
it.
I love that because somebody in our chat room made a point that there are absolutely young female characters who do this too. Reclusive Mage said that. And I agree. But the difference is the options that they can choose to be dark are different. And they're different in our society, and they're different in your book too. Like the available options to kind of, I have this road, and this road is sexy and dark, and this road is maybe what I'm supposed to do. Historically speaking, in fiction, female characters have less options to do darker, uglier things. And I love that you write a fully fledged character who does deeply flawed things, maybe, or deeply conflicted things, I'll say. And that is not exclusive to your male characters as a writer. Yeah.
She's a piece of work, and she has her own, daddy issues, abandonment, trouble with dealing with emotions, trouble letting people in. I do think what you're saying is interesting because in my story, it is a dissection of privilege to some extent. Dre is a very privileged character. That's why he even gets the ticket to go to Berkeley. His parents are very powerful, high up in the government, and a war hero mother. Carrie's dad was a deserter. Her family grew up in poverty. And for her, if she messes up, the stakes are really, really, really high.
Mm-hmm.
And for her family, Dre gets a lot of leeway. And what I think he grapples with is that privilege that when he makes mistakes, people cover up for him. Like teachers give him a slide where she doesn't get it. And he doesn't like that. And he knows it's wrong, but he's not at a place where he knows how to change it or how to do anything about it. And as he grows through the story, he starts to get more tools, I think, to try to see how unfair some things in the system are. But I think that is realistic, that women don't always get as many options or as much leeway for making mistakes as sometimes a character with more privilege, and in this case, this is a male character, has. And sometimes even gets rewarded and praised when he does bad things. So, which we see, yes, does the whole like Stanford, and, you know, there is actually, it isn't the main focus, but there is a sexual assault plot line in college. In the dorms. And again, why is that in there? Well, it's just highly, highly realistic to.
Yeah, it's very, very appropriate. Very, very happens a lot in college.
A lot. I hate to say it, but I think it's important to have important issues like this, even in fiction, even in these kind of.
Yeah, it's an easier way to kind of familiarize yourself with it. You guys, this is a great conversation. I'm super excited to get back to it. We do have to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Okay, I screwed that up. So just say we'll be back after this break. I need to take that out of there.
Yeah, I knew there was something. Sorry, we're going to do it one more time, you guys. We have to take a quick commercial break.
No, quick break.
Okay.
We don't know there's a commercial.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back after this?
Yeah, we'll be right back. We got to quick break. We'll be right back.
I'm so excited to get right back to it in a moment. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Great. Give me a second while I'm here. Thank you to them. Let's see if I can get. We're solving problems on the fly, Jen. We're solving problems on the fly here.
I like watching you guys work.
We do this often.
I find it meditative.
So let's see. So she's kind of off to the left.
Let's
position her off to the left. So I'm gonna get her
centered.
more
I
centered.
prefer that. Yep. And then I'll start the timer. Just give us one more second.
That helped a lot. And then I want to get some of her book covers up. So let me see if I can. This is stuff I should have.
At least some of the chills
earlier.
because.
Oh yeah. So give us one sec, guys at home. One sec. Audible.com.
So while Scott is doing this, and this is not going to be in the podcast in case you're watching, not listening, and Jen, for your information, I will say Jen and Scott and I, there was this thing before the pandemic in Southern California called the Writers with Drinks, I think. Authors with Drinks? Drinklings, yes, Drinklings. And it was Southern California.
Hold on a sec, pause. Saving. And then back to recording. Hit it.
It was Southern California Drinklings. It was writers who had met at conventions, who were on the same docket with the same publisher, whatever. Somebody would coordinate. There's one on the East Coast. There's one on the West Coast. We met Jen there and adore her from the get-go. So it's super fun that we're finally actually talking about work because Scott and Jen have talked about it, but we haven't talked about it a ton.
Oh, right.
That was in the olden days.
A million years ago.
All right, baby, ready to bring us back?
Of course. Give me just a sec. Here we are. Let me set this. 3, 2.
Nope. Oh, shit, I'm not recording. Glad you checked that. And, okay, we have a problem here. Oh, we are recording. Oh, because start a new file. And now you can 3, 2, 1 all you want.
3, 2.
Welcome back to Deep Cuts, where we talk about all things in the world of fiction, writing, and audiobook narration.
Today we're chatting about the role. Oh, sorry, this is actually wrong.
I screwed that up.
Yep, that's okay. Today we're talking with Jennifer Brody, author of A Sacrifice of Blood and Stars, about her fiction writing and specifically also her writing for Disney.
And let's get into that now. We talked about your book. Now we're going to talk a little bit about your experience writing for these giant tentpole franchises, Star Wars, Disney stuff, etc., etc. And over here, we take a look at our Audible page, Sacrifice of Blood and Stars, 13th Continuum, Return, and then all of this work. And then Vera Strange, is that under a separate?
It's under Vera Strange, yeah. Yes. My IP work, most of it, although I have a new secret project that I can't talk about yet.
Okay.
But will actually be under Jennifer Brody for Disney.
And tell us,
I love that.
Tell us about the Vera Strange books.
So Vera Strange was born out of this desire to frighten children, basically. I always say Disney pays me to scare children. It was this idea of creating a brand new series and brand for Disney called Disney Chills, where we bring the best of the best, the iconic Disney villains, anthology style, into different kids' contemporary lives to scare the hell out of them, basically. Each book is crafted for middle grade readers. It's a little bit in the vein of Goosebumps, but I actually think it's a little scarier than Goosebumps, a little darker in cases. Goosebumps has a lot of humor that as a kid went way over my head, but now as an adult, when I look at them, I'm like, these are hilarious. Like R.L. Stine, master comedian. Disney Chills has every book, I like to say, has a dark and horrible ending. It is Unhappily Ever After. And I think when Part of Your Nightmare debuted, people were very shocked by that because they're so used, and which is part of why the series is so transgressive. I think with Disney, we're so used to the happily ever after. We're so used to things turning out okay in the end. And when readers start to get to the last couple chapters, like, she'll get out of it, she'll get out of it. Spoiler, she does not. In my series, the villains win. The villains are the star. They always win. They triumph. I think for a while someone was tracking it online. Only one kid has made it out alive, but not in a great situation. There's even a fan fiction series where someone takes other Disney characters to rescue my characters because they didn't like leaving them in jeopardy.
Which absolutely thrills me because it's sort of your own Wicked, right? It's sort of your own Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. It's awesome. As a creator, I would think that is awesome.
Yeah, for my little horror-loving black heart, it's really great. I always say I'm an accidental horror writer. I never intended, but looking back, I'm like, wow, yeah, the first movies I worked on besides Donnie Darko was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I helped write Leatherface's backstory. It's always followed me very closely. It makes sense. My editor who created this with me, who's gone on to be an author in his own right now, at some point goes, I couldn't imagine anyone else writing Disney Chills except for you. And I was like, I'm not sure if that's a compliment but we are in spooky season. These are perfect for Halloween. And I always say, I think Disney has the best villains. They're diverse. They're all different. The actors that voice them are iconic. Their catchphrases are great.
So you have set me up for all the questions I desperately wanted to ask in an absolute author interview as somebody who has read some but not all of your work. You actually walk through it all. The first one is the first one. I know, because I know you, that you came to writing fiction through other creative endeavors. When you went to college, you studied film, and you worked in film and TV, you worked in you worked in visual creativity. And yet you ended up a novelist. And I want to know if you always thought you would write, if you took the roads that were in front of you. Like, how did you get here from there?
You know, it's really funny, and I don't know if it's my autism or because I'm so literal or what it is. As a kid, I just didn't know you could be an author. I'm from a small town in Appalachia in the Virginia mountains called Roanoke. My parents live in Floyd County now. And everything we read in school was like old white dudes. This was sort of before the renaissance you see in young adult and middle grade fiction, where you really jumped from Nancy Drew to Stephen King and Anne Rice. And aside from Anne Rice, and I don't know if I'd be the writer I am without her existence, she's a huge influence on me. I was obsessed with the Vampire Chronicles in high school. It's fun to see the resurgence of them with the television show now.
It just keeps going around. It's like a Marvel property at this point. They're just going to keep rebooting that thing.
I know, but it is funny when they go back, same as they do when they go read Flowers in the Attic, or they're like, what were you reading? When they go to actually her books, they don't know how transgressive they really are. And they're a little shocked. I'm like, it's horror. They're monsters. They do monstrous things. It's not intended as a blueprint for how to live your life. So get ready. And Rice was great. I was like, wait till you get to the Lestat and Jesus plot lines.
And to your earlier point, they are not necessarily protagonists who are good in any way, shape, or form. They are protagonists who are honest and real, which you do so well. Right. But you do this similar. I have to move on because I have several questions that I desperately wanted to ask.
The short for the story is I didn't know you could do it, but I latched onto movies and film, studied it in school, went to work in it, and I ended up working on a lot of big book to film adaptations, doing development, working with writers on scripts, optioning material. My boss at New Line made the Lord of the Rings trilogy, And I'm a huge Tolkien nerd. Grew up, my dad's a huge fan as well, got me into the books and worked on like stuff like The Golden Compass, a lot of pretty big book to film adaptations. And that kind of led me to wanting to write my own stories.
So I have a question that I have to tell our audience tonight and anybody listening. This is a spoiler for the Disney Chills. Is that called mid-grade?
Middle grade.
Middle grade. These are Disney. They're not children's books. They're not young adult. They're right in the middle there. So depending on your age, this is a spoiler for the Disney Chills books. I have to ask because I've read it. Did you get to pick the villain for your first Disney novel? Because Ursula was my favorite Disney villain until they bought the Aliens franchise, and now it's the Queen. So I have to know.
I want to write Aliens so bad. Scott and I talk about this. I have so much FOMO because he got to write xenomorph stuff. Yes, I picked Ursula. With first brainstorming with the editor, well, he's like, well, who do you want to do first? And I will say it is a hard choice, but Ursula. Agree with you 100%. She is a sea witch. She is basically a drag queen.
Yeah, yeah, she is.
That's right.
So extra. I'm like, how extra? She wears makeup underwater. Do you know how much commitment it takes?
And setting spray, both, all the things.
Underwater. She's fabulous. I always say in the best Disney movies, and I do think Disney, don't fire me, but where they've gone astray a little is they're not doing these great villains in a lot of the recent films.
Okay.
I would actually throw that at Pixar too. They're not doing it as much anymore. I think the last great movie probably was Frozen, where they really went Hans Christian Andersen, fairy tale. We got some of that great dark stuff. That's why I was excited to write Elsa. I think the star, Ariel's fine, but, I think Ursula is really the star of The Little Mermaid. She steals every scene she's in, even when she goes into her humanoid form.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yeah. And, I really would love to write a backstory. Like, what was up with, like, King Triton and Ursula back in the day? I feel like there was something going on.
Well, and I love that because you kind of, like, tipped your hat to, I would write more because of the name of the town or the name of the protagonist girl and things like that, like Shelley and Triton City and all that stuff kind of leads into, if you give me the moment, I will show up for the moment. And I understand that isn't how the Disney Chills books work. Like, these are allegorical lessons a little bit because you're specifically talking to people who are learning something new because of their age. And I get that you and Disney did that together. That's obvious in the progression of this series. But another question, and then I'll let you have the floor back a little. Based on that, and also based on your new Star Wars book, you choose, either you choose to or you end up writing complex characters who surprisingly often end up in unenviable situations at the end of your story. And that is hard, like you just said in about Disney Chills, like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be. And how do you get that done? And how did you sell that? And why? I'm so excited that you get to do that. I'm so pleased that we get to read that. But it seems like that's a harder thing for some folks to do. And you do it sublimely.
Like I said, find it so much more interesting and terrifying and relatable. I have a very overactive imagination. As a kid, I was obsessed with the Grimm fairy tales. Disney Chills, to some degree, is credited with taking the stories back to the original dark fairy tale roots. I think they are cautionary tales. Grimm fairy tales were as well. Our stories are a little more modern in the lessons they're talking about. The first book is a lot about athletics competition, peer pressure, environmentalism. The Corella book is very much about the lengths we go to look good on social media and on Instagram. And, a lot of times what I do is I kind of meditate on, what does this villain really represent? What's really up with them? In Corella's case, I was like, she's the scariest. She was too scary even for me. I was so unhappy writing that book. I was so unhappy writing the end of that book. If you love animals, if you love little fur babies, she, I think, is the worst because, what does she want? She wants to kill puppies to make a coat so she can be fashionable. And
for one season. She wants to kill 101 Dalmatians to make a coat she can only wear to the Met Gala one time.
Exactly. I tell people, I was like, you think John Wick is bad and he murders everyone? This is John Wick on crack. Like, this is John Wick to the extreme. Although Disney wants you to know that no puppies were harmed in the writing of the book.
Of course.
Were harmed in the writing of the book. It was very important that no puppies get hurt. I do have puppies. You have to put the puppies in. But to me, I was like, well, what in the modern age reminds us? So in my book, there is the House of DeVille. It is a high fashion line.
Okay.
Everybody wants to wear it. My character is a scholarship kid to a private school where she's getting bullied because she has knockoffs and she can't fit in. And she gets the chance to steal a Cruella coat, which immediately gets her popularity, makes her look perfect on the Instagram app that we have in the book called Pick Perfect. But of course it backfires, and it starts where she can't take it off. It's the coat starts latching onto her, and then it starts turning her slowly into a mannequin.
Oh, I love it.
Which is one of my greatest fears in certain ways. So I think that has probably one of the darkest endings. I was also writing it into COVID and like turning it in. And the guy I was dating at the time started to be like, there's this virus in China. This was like going into Christmas. My deadlines were always like January 1st. And I was like, I'm too busy. I'm too stressed out with Cruella. Don't bother me about this rumor about this virus that won't matter. Of course, he was right.
Mm-hmm.
Disney Chills, the first book, actually published in April 2020, which was a fabulous time to be trying to come out with a new series.
Must have been crazy.
It was really scary because for those of you who don't know much about kids or the middle grade market or young adult, the places where kids buy books the most, libraries, bookstores, they actually like real books, school libraries, all closed. So it was a very uncertain time. But what was interesting is that the first deal was for 3 books. And before I even delivered the 3rd book and before we even published anything, they extended it to 5, which had never happened before, which was really crazy and exciting. So I basically spent the whole pandemic just madly writing Disney Chills.
Yeah. So that brings me to the question of writing for Disney, writing for a large entertainment company that is very particular about their brand, about their storytelling, about the way they present everything involved in their business. I am right now finishing up a book that is for a movie company, and it has been like pitching a movie or writing a screenplay. There's a lot of notes coming back at all phases of the project. It has been unlike anything I've ever experienced in my 20 years in writing, where they will just change their mind in midstream and say, you know what, that whole thing you wrote, we don't want that anymore. Now we want this over here. And it drives me insane. And it has not been a very overly positive experience. You've written all of these books for Disney. Now you're playing the Star Wars. Yep. How has that been for you? I mean, how do you handle the ongoing notes is what the line is.
The corporate influence?
Yeah, I think it's challenging to some degree. I think having a background in film and having worked on major IP like Lord of the Rings being an example, or even Freddy and Jason, Leatherface, who are also pretty big IP.
That's true.
Of course.
World. And where creators are involved or not involved to different levels, was a good kind of training ground. I feel like I got lucky. I fell through a glitch in the Matrix. I don't know. With Disney Chills, I'm shocked they let me do it. Candidly, I can't believe I got 7 books out of them on this without getting and the series was and has been very, very successful. It's been translated into 14 countries. It was on the front page of Scholastic Book Fair. It sold hundreds of thousands of books basically. So I got very lucky to that extent. There has been a lot of change and stuff going on with Disney in this time period. If you read the news, if you watch anything, and this is also a lot of entertainment companies. So I do feel there's been a little bit of a moving target. For Disney, what I do is I do pretty extensive outlines, and we do go through, I think, about 5 departments of approval, which include things like animation, live action, because all of these characters are in varying degrees of things. Some of them you might know about, and some of them might be totally secret still. Okay. So, an example is the Cruella book came out with the new movie, the Emma Stone movie, and that was on purpose. But again, there's moving pieces. Scar, who I just did, well, you probably know this, but there's a Mustafa movie coming. And obviously Scar is, even though he's not the name of the film, I think we know it's a lot about the brothers, because how can you do their backstory? So I've been pretty lucky in that we basically get those sign-offs. Candidly, they haven't changed a lot for what I give them. The biggest hurdle I ran into, which was confusing and random, and I believe even my editor was confused by it, was when I was doing book 3, which is Captain Hook, and I'm a huge pirate fan. I love pirates. I love Captain Hook.
Okay.
There was something came down where you weren't allowed to put alligators or crocodiles in anything because of that kid that got, remember the kid?
Yeah.
But it was like a long time ago that happened.
And you got a note that said nobody can be eaten by an alligator? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
For Captain Hook.
Well, first of all, it was an alligator, not to be crass about the poor child who perished, but it wasn't really Disney's fault. I mean, it was, it's Florida. If you've ever been to Florida, there's alligators.
There's alligators.
Not to be all like wildlife expert, but crocodiles are different.
Of course.
Species than alligators. But all of that aside, how do you do Captain Hook without the crocodile? It is pretty much the big thing in terms of his.
Yeah, or else he'd be Captain John or something. He'd be Captain Howie. I don't know.
It's such a big element. We were still able to work it in more as kind of like a shadowy presence, and I was able to use like the TikTok, and I think it made it scarier and better in some ways to have to go about it in not a direct fashion. But the funniest part is that the Dr. Facilier Shadow Man book, which is Princess and the Frog, which was book 2, had come before, had already gone through everything. There's a huge alligator sequence in that book.
Okay.
That sailed through, because if you watch the movie, there is in the swamp in the bayou, in the movie, there's a kind of alligator scene.
There you go.
And so it was very much inspired by the film. It's in their own film. And so I thought it was really interesting that had sailed through without any issues, and then suddenly it was like the brakes were on. So it's a little of a side piece, but yeah, so there are challenges. I would say it's been pretty good working through. The new project I did had extra challenges because I had to get notes from someone besides Disney who's partnered on the project that will be hopefully announced soon, that I turned in, that I'm excited about. Star Wars was probably the most difficult I've dealt with, to be honest.
Okay.
Which I think people who've worked in Star Wars would tell you.
Very particular.
Their story department is very rigorous. Mm-hmm. I think, Scott, you would agree. The hardest thing is when they tell you they want one thing, mm-hmm. and then you change it to the thing they want, and then they change their mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's after you change.
Yes.
And go back. So I think with Vader, what it was, and this was interesting, is that Disney lets me go pretty dark.
Okay.
My first pitch to Lucasfilm was deemed too dark, even though I'm writing Darth Vader. Okay. And I was told that he wasn't allowed to kill anybody.
What?
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Wild.
Yep.
Wild.
And like, you didn't even get to respond like, have you seen Star Wars? Like, have you seen A New Hope?
About the puppies with Krill, I'm like, you are aware of the movie that you did make.
Yeah. The movie that is canon.
I didn't make it up. It wasn't my idea. I didn't invent it.
But now they're like, Jennifer, you cannot.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
That's great.
Do the thing that we did. It's even true. The new thing I was working on has had a lot of iterations, and it does have the arena of it has a lot of fans. And it was challenging because there've been a lot of versions, including like live action, animated, a story, all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Some of which, what was in the original, is now deemed not correct.
Correct.
So there was a lot of that as well, kind of cleanup going on, even though the original is a classic, and I don't think that'll help you guess it, but it is a classic movie that a lot of people love, that a lot of people revisit for the holidays. So, I think with Star Wars, that was hard, and then I changed it so he doesn't kill anyone, and then the note came back, well, this doesn't make sense, because Vader would just kill this character.
Well,
and I'm
as a person who gets to, or tried to write Darth Vader without killing anybody, where can all the people listening to this podcast find out more about you and your obviously psychopathic murderous ways?
Well, my website is just jenniferbrody.com. My books are in Amazon, Barnes & Noble. They are on Audible. Not all of Disney shows, but quite a few are an audiobook. So I'm pretty easy to find. Social media, I'm at Jennifer Brody. On Twitter, Jennifer Brody Writer. On Facebook and Instagram. I think I'm at Jennifer Brody on TikTok.
That's awesome.
There's so much social media now.
Too much.
It has been so much fun to talk to you. I'm so glad that we had the time to do this. Congratulations on your new Star Wars book. Congratulations of Sacrifice of Blood. Did I do that right? Blood and Stars?
Yeah.
Got it. completely
Keep
right.
doing the bone. I keep doing it wrong.
It's
Congratulations on
I
that,
should
too.
put
That's
bone
coming
in
out
the
this
next one. Book 2 is actually called A Sacrifice of Flesh and Fury. So get
Okay.
a little closer
Yep.
to the bones.
Yep, for sure.
I
I'm
will
just going to
say-
call that Flesh and Bone. We know that already about me.
can.
I'm going to try and correct it, though.
Yep.
Thank you so
Fix
much
it.
for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you. When the next book comes out, let's have you on again. That was super fun.
I would love that. Thanks, guys. You're the best.
Bye.
Can't wait to see you soon.
Same.
Okay.
Is she off?
Yeah,
Oh.
we have no way to get people off the show without it being there. So let me finish this up. Oh, yes, do our outro, baby. Oh, it's me.
Yeah, this is. Oh, I see.
No, wait.
Yeah,
there we
this
go.
is
Ready?
it for this
Ready?
episode. Yep.
That's it for this episode of Deep Cuts.
Next episode, we are going to be in a remote location. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Next Wednesday, we're going to be in Arizona at ASU talking to one of our colleagues. I'm not sure why balloons are running up the screen. Next week, we're going to be in Arizona at ASU talking to one of our collaborators in a live, not this venue. And I don't want to say too much else about it, but hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday.
Okay, there we go.
You want to say thanks for joining
Oh,
us?
shit. Yep.
Oh,
Thank you for joining us.
yeah, you guys, we'll see you next week.
Okay. Great. Okay, great. Now we're getting back to it. Obviously, again, we're having some kind of weasel with our sound here. We won't know how it's going to be until we get done. But something crept back in.
And it
with the
sounds like
setting.
it's in my, I can sort of hear like something in my headphones.
Actually, you sound fine to me.
You sound fine to me.
Is that right? So it might be actually okay. So we'll do what we can with that. But Chris was hearing it. He said it was very tinny for you, but you sound perfectly fine to me.
Oh, interesting. I sound a little echoey to me in my own ears.
Okay. Recluse Mage says Scott is more echo. Oh, that was our dog. That was our dog. We will figure that out. But what a fun guest. And
what a great time that was.
and she and I are actually talking about collaborating on a project together in the future.
He means Jennifer.
Jennifer, yeah. Jennifer is just super wicked smart and super fun to talk to all the time. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. We keep working on angles of writing an audiobook. And for someone who's written for some of the biggest properties on the planet in the history of mankind, she was a captivating guest.
Absolutely. And it was so interesting. We didn't get into it too much, but you both have, it sounds like similar experiences working with different big content owners. Because she mentioned at the beginning she would love to write for Alien.
Yep.
And you have done that.
My Alien experience was actually pretty smooth. It was real good.
But there were some similarities of like, here's a thing you're going to have to deal with that we're not going to let you write about, even though you have written a good book. You're going to need to change some stuff. She seems to have had some of that same stuff happen.
Totally.
I have dissected every single little bit of your archive and your content, and now you're telling me that I can't write something you've already written in your
It's
content.
what she went through. Like,
Yeah,
I am
exactly.
literally writing stuff that is in the most popular movie you have ever put out in your whole company's existence. And now you're telling me I can't write the stuff that you put on the screen.
Yeah, it's got to be infuriating as a content creator, but it's interesting for me as a content consumer of these things that I would love to see that angle. And having read your books and having read some of Jen's books, like I want to see how that creative mind digs into Cruella's need for puppies or whatever, or some of the things that you weren't allowed to write about, which we can't talk about in Alien. Like, I can explain this because I am so well versed in the content.
Yep.
And as creators, you're sort of hamstrung just by the suits, I'll say, and I know
Damn suits.
Yeah.
It's the suits, you guys. It's always the
that
fucking
was super
suits,
fun.
man.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you want, and I will say, if you are adults like me, even if you don't have kids like me, you don't have to not check out the middle grade books. I don't think that they're for me, every single one of them, but I loved reading the first one about Ursula because it's so informative about how fiction reaches young minds. And I have nieces and nephews, so I wanted to learn some of that.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say, let me go back to chat. Go back to this one. That's a terrible screen. That doesn't work at all.
Okay, that doesn't work at all.
Well, just since we're on the screen, down there, A Sacrifice of Blood and Stars. I really enjoyed it. I was fortunate enough to get to blurb the book, and Jen's very sharp in the marketing and works with her publishers in the marketing, so they sell it as a space romantasy because that trips certain algorithm buttons. But I would not have thought this as a romance novel at all. At all. It's not the most violent, warlike military sci-fi that I've ever read, but there is a bunch of really gripping action, and where the story really flies, where it soars, is in the characters, in the relationships, and in that Deep Space Dear John angle, which we won't spoil at all. But it's very clever and very well done. So
we're done for tonight. You guys can tell. We will be back next week. We won't be in this studio, and after that, I will tell you more when we blurb it next Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll get a little heads up on it and try and let you know what is coming. It's going to be an interesting time. We don't know how well it's going to work.
That's why I don't know what to say right now. I don't know how to say we'll see you next week because we'll see you next week.
So sorry, Steve. Wait a minute.
Steve.
Where's
Thanks.
Steve's
Hey,
goddamn
Pam.
thing?
Hopefully you received a package from me this weekend.
One
Tell
second.
me if you did
I'm
not.
looking for Steve's icon.
You got it. Party, maybe?
Junkie Party. Boom. There it is. This Saturday, there is the monthly Junkie Party, which is hosted by Steve the Iceberg Rickyberg. He's on for 7 hours. So if you people want to come hang out, chat with other junkies, chat with Steve, talk about whatever's going on, you can absolutely do that. Steve, thank you for reminding us in the chat room. Obviously, I'm a little bit off my game today. I'm almost done with Warpath.
Yep.
And I've gotten a few curveballs thrown at me on this book, Warpath. And it's been a bit of a tough go, ladies and gentlemen. But that's it for us for this week. Baby, got anything else?
Just two things. We're over here now. Is that right? I can't see it over there. So
there we go.
So I will say tonight, if you are one who celebrates Shana Tova, for everybody who's celebrating the Jewish New Year tonight, Rosh Hashanah tonight, if you are around on Saturday, I will probably join that junkie party for a little bit of time at the very least, trying to see what else is on my plate I can't do right now because my Wi-Fi is turned off. And that's it.
Yep. And somebody wanted a link, so I'm just going to link. I'm going to paste in the link here. Did you guys want a link for the book or a link for the Junkies Party? Go back to this. That didn't work out. Yeah. If it's for the Junkies Party, let's get that back up again. That link is bit.ly/junkies party. And then I will get the book link up here. I think hard to see. This should do the trick. Or you just go ahead and go. Hi, hey, Neil, how's it going? Just go for it.
You have to do to the question mark. Oh,
I guess that works. I think that'll do it. Anyways, we are out. We're going to do our post work, and then I'm going to go chill for a little bit and hopefully get a nap.
And Pam, I'm going to follow up with your shipment, which should have arrived or should arrive soon. But until then, you guys.
Let's get over here, and that is it for us. And we got a 7-second delay. It's so crazy. Goodbye, guys. We'll see you next